What's up guys, today I'll be going over all the supers in the game and comparing them by damage, then also how useful they are in general for ad clear and all those things like that. And not only will I break down every single subclass, I will actually break down every single individual supers. For example, voidwalker has 2 different Nova bombs, so I will be testing both of them individually and not just the subclass as a whole. So in total, there will be 18 supers broken down in this video, give or take a few, because some of them are pretty similar, so I'm not going to go ahead and test like duplicates. But the first part will be purely the super alone, then the second part of the video will be like using exotics, then also taking advantage of the subclass perks on like ads and whatnot. For example, dawnblade, when you get a kill, it extends the duration. So the second part of the video will be like general gameplay, but the first part, starting right now, will be just raw damage comparison between all the supers in the game on the same target, because a lot of people have asked me to make a video about that. So I'm going to go ahead and do it and show you guys which super does the most damage. So what I'm going to do is, in the Prestige Leviathan, in the Castellum, I'm going to throw all the supers at that guy, and it's Prestige by the way, that way they don't die, they have a lot of health. Basically this was the most consistent target I can find in the entire game to test this with. But anyways, as you saw, the top tree Nova Bomb, which is the Shatter one, roughly did a third of his health. Right here, I'm going to go ahead and throw it at him again, because it's a lot of RNG, those projectiles, and as you see, they don't really track that well. They're just kind of like random, they just kind of go wherever they want. Now with Bottom Tree Nova, which is personally my favorite, the one I point people towards for Nova Bomb on single targets, I like this one a lot more. As you see, on impact it does almost right under a third, then over time, it takes him down to a little bit more than a third of his health gone, and it's way more consistent than Top Tree, and it's, in my opinion, the best Nova Bomb in the game. Now we're going to go ahead and use Dawnblade, and since both trees of Dawnblade are basically the same for single target, they both can throw the same amount of swords, and outside of killing ads, there's actually no difference between the two trees, so we're only going to test it once. So, I am using Bottom Tree though, just to let you guys know. As you see, I'm going to go and pop my super and throw them all at this guy, and it's actually not that terrible as I would have thought. It's almost exactly a third of his health, and I didn't really think Dawnblade was that decent for boss damage, but it's actually not that bad. Now with stormcaller, and I'm going to use Top Tree first. Top Tree has a perk where if you have your grenade and melee fully charged, your stormcaller, or storm trance I should say, lasts longer and it fully restores your health. So we're then going to do that one first, and it's always been my opinion that stormcaller was completely trash for single targets, and I was kind of proven wrong by this test, as you'll see. I got pushed back, so I missed like half a second of doing damage, but I mean, nothing you can really do about that. As you see, it's actually kind of chunking him. He's almost to half health, which is kind of a lot. It's the most so far out of all of the Warlock supers. As you see, you can see his health bar, I came back. It's almost to halfway. Now Bottom Tree, which is basically the same name but has landfall, which is like the Titan Slam effect when you first pop it, then it doesn't have the perk where it lasts longer. So basically you're trading a few seconds of duration for landfall, as you saw right there. And this one is not quite as good. It isn't trash, like as you see, it still is like the second most damage I've done on Warlock so far to the single target, maybe right there tied with Nova Bomb. Now moving on to Titan on Sunbreaker Bottom Tree, which is the whole like Sunspot build. The build that was very common in D1, but the issue with this build in this game is you don't have melting points, so no one really uses this tree that often, but it's still a pretty good tree. As you see, I'm going to go ahead and pop my super right there, so I'm in a sunspot, and when you're standing in a sunspot, it makes your hammers last longer and be able to throw hammers faster, I believe. So as you see, it actually does a decent amount of damage. It's almost right around that halfway mark, like some of the Warlock ones. Now, moving on to the Top Tree, which is the more common one to use because of melting point. This is the whole super where the hammers explode, then they like chain and whatnot. But on a single target, obviously the only thing you're really getting out of it is the hammer shattering, which is pretty nice. But as you see, it doesn't do as much damage as Bottom Tree, and it's a lot more RNG because of the explosions. But still, it was a pretty decent chunk of damage for the super. Moving on to Sentinel Bottom Tree, which is the one that gives you an extra shield to throw. Both trees can both throw shields, but the Bottom Tree gives you an extra one. And I tried a few different combos, and it was actually, this was like the worst super I've experienced so far on this guy. It was really hard to hit him because he pushed you away, and there's like almost no way to stop it unless you're doing that attack exactly when he slammed. And then I didn't really find shield throws to be useful at all. So in general, the super was honestly really hard to damage a single target consistently. I couldn't really find a way to do it. Like as you see right there, I'm just trying to pop my super, get pushed away. There's like no way to get in on the target without getting stomped away. But I mean, if you're in a full fire team like on Valcor, this super actually isn't that bad. So I mean, it's probably right there with some of the other supers where if you hit all of your combos, it'd be right around, you know, that third to halfway point. Then anyways, top tree sentinel is the exact same thing as bottom tree, except the extra shield and the option to place Word of Dawn, which as you see right here, obviously that's only to do damage to a boss, so we can move on from that. Now moving on to striker, which was like the go-to subclass for Titan when the game first came out because of the double pulse nades. Well, on bottom tree, as you see here, this is basically just plain striker. There's nothing really special about it at all, and I was trying to do a few combos, and I just like sentinel, it really like struggles for single target damage. Now with top tree striker, which is the whole like aftershock and like the wave of lightning on the ground and stuff, as you see, it's a little bit better, and if you time it right, I think you can get off 4 or 5 slams. As you see, that's 3, 4, yeah, you can only get off 4 slams. Maybe you can get in the knee in between there, but as you see, it took him at least down to a third, which is better than before. Now moving on to hunter, the last class. We're going to be on arcstrider bottom tree at first. And basically, bottom tree has nothing that buffs the super damage. It just has like things for dodging and whatnot. But as you see, a lot of people believe arcstrider is the best like damage super in the game for a single target. And as you see, without Raid Influx, it actually isn't all that. It's decent. As you see, it stun locks the crap out of them, but it doesn't even bring him down to a third. So on its own, the super actually isn't that crazy. Now we're then going to do top tree, which has a perk where after dodging, it gives you extra damage, which is pretty interesting. And from what I found, it's actually not worth the dodge in between doing damage to a single target. So once the buff runs out, there's no point re-dodging to get the buff back up, because the amount of time it takes to dodge, you miss like 2 swings on them, and you end up doing less damage overall. So this perk is actually really good for like ad clear when you're going in between like a group of ads or whatever. That's when you want to be using it. And it did obviously increase my damage because I had the perk going at first, but re-proccing the perk would actually lose damage in the long run on a single target. Now to golden gun without Nighthawk yet. So just base golden gun, the bottom tree, which is the precision shot increasing when you hit a head, it does more damage. As you saw, each shot hit more and more damage as I went. Now with top tree, which is 6-shooter, which is the go-to PvP one, and if you guys didn't know, this super you cannot hit critical hits, so it's only body shots, and you have to shoot them relatively quickly to get all 6 off. As you saw right there, it's actually garbage, don't use it in PvE. Now the final super we're going to be talking about is Nightstalker, which is tether and all that stuff. And if you guys don't know, tether doesn't actually really damage a boss directly. It does on impact. If you use this perk, it actually does a little more damage if you tether them and shoot them again. But obviously that's like almost nothing, so we're going to talk about the main things that tether actually does for you. So as you see on this ogre, when I shoot him with my hand cannon, I hit that number. When I shoot him with my energy weapon, I hit that number. And finally my power weapon. Now we're going to go and do the same thing but tether him now and see what it actually buffs and what it doesn't. You see, now that he's tethered, my hand cannon got buffed, my energy weapon got buffed, but my power weapon does not. And the buff percent is 35% for both your kinetic weapons and your energy weapon, but not your power. Another thing to mention is it does not stack with melting point and it overrides it. So tether does not work with melting point or power weapons, so there's a lot of issues with it. So basically the only way tether is used at like a high-end level is with Orpheus Rig, and it's basically just used to create orbs for your team and also to keep ads under control, which it does both of those very, very well. But basically that's all it does well though. This super needs to work with power weapons or at least shotguns and snipers in your energy slot come Forsaken, and it needs to probably work with melting point also for this thing to actually be used. I know a lot of hunter mains that literally don't even touch this class almost ever outside of making orbs for your teammates and Argos. It needs a lot of work. So now we're kind of transitioning into the second part of the video where we're using exotics and also just talking about the supers in general. So now back to arcstrider with Raid Influx. Raid Influx makes this super insane. As you saw without Raid Influx, it was alright, it wasn't even too crazy, but with Raid Influx, as you see, every hit extends the duration and also increases the damage. As you see, I'm barely halfway through my super and I've already taken off half his health. and it almost kills him. As you see, I probably would have actually killed him. I probably could have gotten one more hit off if I didn't have to keep walking forward because of how much stun lock this guy was in. As you see, he's like roughly 10-15% health left. Red Influx Arcstrider is easily the highest damage output super in the game, and it's not even close. Now back over to Golden Gun. This time we're going to be using Nighthawk with the bottom tree, which is the extra precision damage. And we all know, since D1, Nighthawk will always be the king of burst damage in Destiny. The amount of damage it can do in like one click is actually insane. Took off half his health instantly, so there's nothing matching how much burst damage Nighthawk will do. Now moving back to Sentinel, this time we're going to be talking more about the ad clear part of this super, because that's where it really shines and excels, especially when you pair it with something like Doomfang Pauldron, which basically increases the duration of the super every time you get a grenade hit, and every melee kill recharges your grenade. And basically how this works is, in your super, your shields are considered your grenade, and your regular attack is considered your melee. So whenever you get a melee kill, it gives you more shields, and if you get shield hits, it gives you more super, and basically you can combo these three things forever. And as long as there's enough ads around, you will never run out of super, and you can basically kill ads infinitely. As you see, I almost cleared this entire room without losing any super at all. Just keep on chucking shields around whenever I get them on cooldown, and that's basically all you have to do. It's basically an infinite super if you use it correctly. Now moving on to the other two Titan subclasses, they don't really have any exotics or anything else to mention outside of the damage test I did earlier. The only thing you could add is Synthoceps, which is a 50% buff when you're surrounded by enemies, and it works with both supers. Speaking of insane ad clear supers, back to Dawnblade. Doing single target damage with Dawnblade doesn't really show what it's all about. Basically bottom tree, whenever you get a kill with Daybreak, it extends the duration. So in my opinion, it's basically what Sentinel does without needing an exotic, and it does it better in my opinion. This super is actually the most broken super in the entire game if you know how to use it in both PvP and PvE. It's honestly just insane. Like, I'm going through this entire Lost Sector without even dropping my super bar at all. It's actually crazy. So if you're doing like something like EP, you could literally probably have this thing procced the entire time as long as you use it correctly. It's all about not spamming. Now back to Stormcaller, we're going to go ahead and use Top Tree again with the perk that makes Storm Trains last longer if you have both abilities on cooldown. Then we're going to go ahead and throw on Crown of Tempest, which is the best Stormcaller helmet, and basically what it does, it's all about ability cooldown rates and also extending your super with arc kills, and using the super itself counts as arc kills, so it's basically kind of like a Radiant Flux but not as good. It has the part of Radiant Flux where it extends the duration of the super but does not increase the damage, which I think it could really use, because this super, when it comes down to it, does a decent amount of damage over a long amount of time, but its damage per second is pretty bad, and I think it could use a lot of work. Now that we've shown off all the things that the supers have to offer, I'm going to talk about which ones are the best per class. So starting with Dawnblade, in my opinion, it's the best Warlock super. What it can do in certain situations for ad clear and whatnot is just absurd, and its super isn't great for single target damage, but it's not terrible. But just the fact that this thing can clear an entire like strike without even dropping a single like take of super is absurd. Then it doesn't even need an exotic to be good, so you can use other exotics on top that you want to use that fit your playstyle. Now the second best Warlock super is probably Voidwalker. The bottom tree does a lot of damage instantly, so you can basically throw it, then move on and go back to shooting with your rocket launcher, sniper, whatever it is. So its burst damage is very high, which is very good for a lot of situations. Not to mention the subclass around Voidwalker is obviously the best subclass in the entire game. Don't at me. Devour is literally broken. And finally, moving on to the last super I haven't mentioned yet, is Stormcaller. Stormcaller is pretty decent ad clear and pretty decent single target damage. It just does its damage very slowly over a long amount of time. I think it could do one of the two things a little bit better, then I'd probably like it more, but it's kind of average at a lot of things, which is fine. It's a very balanced super. I just don't see myself using it over Voidwalker for single target damage or Dawnblade for ad clear, so it kind of doesn't fit in anywhere in the game currently, in my opinion. Now moving on to Titan, I would say the best super on Titan is probably Sentinel. Just like Dawnblade, what it can do in a lot of situations is actually insane, especially when you pair it with these exotic gauntlets right here. Just like Dawnblade, you can clear out entire strike without losing your super at all. Just one super can clear entire strike. That's just broken. Now, like I said before, it's not great for single target damage, but just like Dawnblade, it just makes it that good. Now in second spot, I have Sunbreaker. Sunbreaker's kind of in the middle. It's really good at single target damage. then it's also good for ad clear also, especially when you pair it with Synthoceps. When you're in the middle of ads, you'll then get that 50% buff for your super, and also for damaging bosses. Then also hammers have melting point, which is another bonus over other subclasses that can't get that 50% buff to help your entire team. Then finally we have striker, which is probably the least used subclass in the game if I had to guess right now. When the game first came out, everyone used to run this thing a lot in PvE for the double pulse nades, but obviously that meta is long gone. Basically, the subclass has almost nothing going for it anymore. It doesn't have a buff for your team. Really, the only thing it has is double pulse nade, and its super is very bad in my opinion. And finally, moving on to Hunter, the last class in the game to talk about. Arcstrider with Radiant Flux is the best super in the game, period, in the story. Just like Dawnblade and Sentinel, it's very good for ad clear, but the difference is those are really good at clearing low tier ads. Radiant Flux Arcstrider can clear an entire room of majors like it's nothing. Then its single target damage is the highest damage output of all the supers by far, and it's not even close. It does double the damage of a single golden gun shot. Although it does take a long time to get all of its damage out, it's still extremely good. The second best Hunter super is Golden Gun in my opinion with Nighthawk. It's the go-to super for boss damage in almost every scenario in both D1 and D2. Whenever you drop a boss's shield in a raid or whatever, first thing you do is hit him with a Nighthawk before you start using your power weapon or whatever it is. I mean, its burst damage is unmatched. It probably will be the king of burst damage for the history of Destiny. Like, nothing will do burst damage better than Nighthawk itself. Then lastly, we have Nightstalker, which in my opinion could be one of the best supers in the game if they fix a lot of the issues it has. Issue number 1 does not work with power weapons. Issue number 2 does not stack with melting point, and it overrides melting point. And since melting point is a higher buff percent, obviously you're going to be wanting to use that over it. So when you play Tether, you're sacrificing your own damage to support your teammates, but it doesn't even support them because it doesn't work in the first place. Basically, the only use of this is creating orbs or buffing other people's super damage. Let's say you're playing EP where you tether 2 knights and they share damage. That's actually optimal because you can then throw a Nova Bomb at them and the Nova Bomb will hit both and share the damage. So that's really the only use to actually support your team, that and orbs. But anyways, that's gonna be it for the video. Let me know what you guys think about all the things I said, what you would change, and what is personally your favorite super in the game. Anyways, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.